observation. I want to start with a story. A week ago at this time, I was in Myanmar. We flew into Yangon, which is otherwise known as Rangoon, and traveled about 300 miles north near Bagan. And I was able to participate in a series of visits to rural villages where they were holding microfinance community meetings. And this was not part of my work here at the center, but very much related to our work here at the center, in that the following observations that I made there were sort of struck me very deeply. First of all, the people were enormously happy. Second, they took their credit very seriously, far more seriously than perhaps many of us take our credit card credit. The third thing that was interesting to me was how transparent they all were with each other as it relates to who paid their loan back, what loans they wanted to take out, the process by which they would elect for new loans to be dispersed. And they were in these 25 equal payments over an 11-month period of time, and they would then be ready for the next cycle. The other thing that in interviewing the participants of these microfinance organizations, the clients, so to speak, and even making some house visits. Of course, these were thatched buildings on struts so that they could avoid floods, and would have animals right there in the front yard, which were 2 cows, a few pigs, and so on. But the way that they were able with each cycle to raise their station, they could send a child to school that they wouldn't normally be able to send to school. They would be able to buy some palm trees in addition to have some livestock. They would be able to invest in parts to start a motorcycle repair shop, in between the 2 villages that were close by. This sort of, it was incredibly calculated, almost, perfect portfolio theory in the way that they would want to diversify their sources of income as they were able to add a little bit of investment in themselves each time, and even some micro enterprises being generated, like the motorcycle shop. Not just could I put more pigs in my pig pen, or could I add more cows to my cattle holdings. I don't think those micro enterprises will necessarily become the kinds of social enterprises from frontier economies that we serve here at GSBI. But I do think that the lesson about the transformational change that effective financial support of even the basic investment needs of a community could make struck me very hard. The other thing that struck me was the democratic process. Now remember, I was in Myanmar. This is a country under a military dictatorship for a long time, up until almost the last 2 years. And so learning what a democratic voice or community voice is about, and how to organize that voice, how to make decisions on a community scale in a democratic way, was particularly transformative, at least in my opinion. I also got to learn a little bit about what unpotable water is about, and the dangers thereof. But it was really an interesting meeting. The reason I bring that up is because I think that our effort here at GSBI has been focused on how do you make a better social enterprise, how do you make it scale, how do you teach the social enterprises a little bit about unit economics, a little bit about their organizational development, a little bit about their mission. But one of the things that we forgot along the way was how do we, in fact, make these enterprises more investment ready. I think our first leg to make them more investment ready was to go out and engage with the impact investing community. What is impact investing? It is a way of utilizing impact, or in this case, investment mechanisms and processes to help support with capital prosperity that develops from within the community environments in frontier economies. And so we know a lot about, in our group here at Santa Clara and in the mentor group that we have, and of course just generally in this geography, we know a lot about what it takes to do capital, what it takes to provide capital support for venture capital investing. And in impact capital, I think, unfortunately, we use some of those same lessons, and I'll get to that in a moment. But one of the things that we weren't doing at GSBI was saying, how do you connect to impact capital, and how do you make yourself more investment ready? So along the way, we got a chance to speak to about 46 funds, and we released a report called Coordinating Impact Capital. And the approach there was, hey, all of us who are practitioners in the impact capital community, we need to coordinate our efforts a little bit better together. We need to understand what the phased approach and what the evolution of these social enterprises would be, and what the appropriate type of capital would be given where they were along their evolutionary path to become a more scalable organization. The second thing that we learned was that most impact investors went into investment into social enterprises with about a 3 to 5 year time horizon for their investment. And suddenly they find, well, maybe it's more like 5 to 7 years. And now they're saying, well, it's really 7 to 13 years. So what they're saying is, hey, somebody move the goalposts, right? They just keep, almost, they're in the red zone, they're almost there ready to make the return on capital, and somebody moves the goalposts again. And the reason for that is our bad behavior. And the behavior issues that we have is we often are using, as investors in the impact community, the wrong kind of scaling investment vehicle, which is, in this case, we use equity, because that's what we use for venture capital. And so there are some new models being tried. There's, of course, grant making, and there's recoverable grants, and there's some soft loan kinds of structures out there. But predominantly, the people that we spoke to had predominantly used equity as their investment vehicle. And equity, unfortunately, is a promise that most social enterprises cannot keep. It's not that they don't want to keep. It's not that they don't want their investors to make some money because they want, because they put some money into their social enterprise. It's because they're in frontier environments where realizing an IPO isn't quite as easy as realizing an IPO here. And because they're in a community or with a business proposition where, as we found through our GSBI program, they're primarily looking for an impact on a regional or community scale. They're not after global domination the same way, say, Facebook would be after global domination. So, it really makes a difference. The final difference is the social enterprises that we see come through our door are usually started by people who come from a culture that when you start a company, you have a role through that company, and a positive one to make and play in the community that you're serving. And they like that role. And that the ownership of those social enterprises are dreamed of in a generational way, meaning that they want to keep this social enterprise, the ownership of this company, in their family hands for generations. And to ask those social enterprises to say, go sell yourself in a merger or acquisition in order to pay back your equity investors is a little tough. Tough promise for them to keep. So we got to thinking about what would be better. And we examined a bit about royalty-based financing, looking at revenue. It's called revenue-based financing. This is where you're taking a top-line approach to say, okay, if you forecast a certain amount of sales each year over the next 5 years, we'll take a percentage of that. We'll also have a debt in there that you pay off the debt over time, and perhaps there's a little equity kicker involved in this. And all of that is great, except for one problem, and that is that I think is probably evident to most of us who start running down this path of social enterprise, and that is that the economies that we're serving in these frontier environments are primarily agriculture. So you see big shifts in the cash flow from one season to the next. And they don't take money out of the organization every month because they don't have earnings every month. They might have earnings on a season, and they might not have earnings in the next season. Or even if they're service industries to an agricultural economy, the same thing is true. They might get paid one season, and they might not get paid the next season because their clients don't have that kind of money. And so you need to have an instrument that takes into account some of these problems. And so we started thinking about the demand dividend. We were fortunate enough to make enough noise that we got a grant to support the test firing of the demand dividend in the marketplace. And so with the help of Wilson Sonsini to construct this and Campbell Law Group to construct this. We have made a term sheet. We've actually put it on a website. You can play around with it and have self-generate your own little term sheet, which I can tell you where it is if you give me your card and you want to play. But I think it's illustrative of, all right, how do we move the sliders and gauges to approximate the social enterprise for what they are and where they are in their gestation and the kind of capital appetite that they deserve to have fed, at least for the moment. So some of the other problems that we try to solve is that, you know, this goalpost keeps moving, so we say, look, there's a limit on demand dividend. It has a 4-year limit, but you can pay it back at any time before that, and you can issue a new demand dividend, and basically it's replaceable. So you would just replace it. The theory being that if you're looking at a 4-year history of a social enterprise that was a good investment in the first place, its business velocity and its ability to pay off a demand dividend would be higher the next year. So we say, let's just put a cap and revolve this. And so now we have phased investing as opposed to leaving money in a frontier marketplace for a long period of time, which is subject to war, pestilence, coup d'etats, currency devaluations, and other misbehavior by regulatory bodies. So
much like Silicon Valley. Yeah?
Much like Silicon Valley. So we thought, you know, maybe there's a shorter-term cycle, and a phased investment approach might be in fact a benefit. So we traded away some of the high-end, you know, 10x return aspirations for more of the reliable return aspirations. And I think we also wanted to do some things that helped protect the provisions, and some other you know, fancy entities would want to go in and say, gee, we want to make sure you don't go lease a large office building and therefore never report a profit. So there's some controls there that need to be involved. But generally, this is like venture debt, and it's like something that we've done in the Valley in the past. We just need to architect it for the realities of frontier markets. So with that, I'll stop. I'll be happy to answer questions and happy to give you a website so you can go play around. We think it's a very exciting program, and we have a number of investors that are pretty excited about joining this trial list. Thank you.